Okay, well, I was just recording the beginning of how to paint Rust, and unfortunately my computer crashed and I lost the footage. But I'll try to explain as thoroughly as possible under these circumstances on what I did. So we have to start by saying I have this bestial brown, orange brown that works best for my purposes, for what I think does it good as a Rust color. And painting Rust is always a design choice, because when you look at Rust in reality, you have all these kind of spots that show different discolorations, ranging from orange to brown to yellow even. And for example, in this case, I decided I don't want to go for yellow Rust, because we have these kinds of discolorations down here that are yellow, and I think that would probably not make that much sense to have two yellow tones that look rather similar, represent different things on a miniature. But yeah, so the thing is, bestial brown is out of print and you can't get it anymore, so it gives this kind of color. And trying to mimic that, the best thing that I came up with was using orange brown by Vallejo model color and mixing it with some Model Air armor brown. You can see the armor brown up here. It has a bit of that red in the color tone, and when you mix it with this orange, then this is something that you get. Again, it's not perfect, but it's probably the closest that you can get to the other orange tone. I have to play with it, so adding more of that orange brown gives you a bit more of the intensity. And like I said, that's about the closest thing that I have found that will give you the intensity. What you can try and do is add a bit of an intense, you can see that, add a bit of an intense orange. This will make it even more intense, as you can see. Still not perfect, but like I said, that's the best recipe that I have found so far. You could try it by adding a bit of red. Just play around and see what color tones will look good for you. And like always, not everyone's going to be satisfied with the same red tones, and you will just have to try and see what works for you. So again, since this is a model color, what I do is I mix a bit of a brown by scale color into the armor brown, and then I do mix a few different ratios with water, and again I do add dish soap, just so that surface tension is a bit more broken up, and it spreads better on the miniature. So what I was showing is that I start by mixing a rather light ratio, so more water than color, and then I just go over the whole thing like that, and you can see that there's already a bit of a discoloration, and I'm trying to not touch the areas that are really intense, not to take away from them. So like this, and then also I do start in the recesses, for example here or here, and if you want to, you can just glaze over some areas, or you can apply a bit of a wash in deeper areas, but always focus on the recesses. And for example here, and don't forget to also cover the parts that are pockmarks. And you can also use this for dark lining. Just generally, rust would accumulate in those areas that are, you know, prone to accumulation of water, of course. Okay, this is an area I'm not particularly fond of, so I'll paint over that again with the green, but just ignore it for now. And then yeah, also, like I said, starting in the dark areas, I'm just mixing in that bit of a dark red brown, and this is going to be my base for the more intense rust. And as you can see, I'm doing that over and over. It does turn a bit dusty, sort of like you were adding dust and pigments to those areas. And once it gets dusty and looks gets a really dry appearance, then you are usually ready to apply the next color, the more intense red. Just trying to find a few areas where I feel like the base is not intense enough. Except here, maybe those parts. Yeah, I was also focusing a lot on the temples there. Just to add some more discoloration. And then I have a few areas where I went overboard and covered a lot more area. For example here. And yeah, sometimes you will have discolorations in the highlights, and then when that happens and I'm not happy with it, I just go over it again with a mid-tone and the highlight. But you know, that always depends on how much time you want to invest and what you want to achieve. Okay, just going over those recesses again. Okay, so again you can see the dry look here also, and that's when I feel like you're ready to move on to the more intense red or reddish brown that you maybe mixed, or if you're lucky you still have some of that bestial brown. And then I start by covering this area. Also make sure that your layers are not too wet, because then it will start to creep into areas that you don't want it to be in. Oh, something I forgot. Let's just touch on that again. So for example, around those exhaust openings, you also want to put in some rust, as it would probably accumulate there a lot. And then this spot here was perfect for some streaking, and I always build a bit of a base, sort of a delta of a river, and then have some lines go down here, and that's what we call streaking. on larger scale models, what you can do is apply oil-based colors there, and then just use a thinner and drag it down, and that way it will create super realistic streaking. But on surfaces that are rather tiny compared to that, you can get away by just painting on those streaks with your brush, just to create some interest or some interesting points. What you also can do is, for example, here we can pretend like there's a crack in the armor. Probably want some black there also mixed in, just so that we simulate shadow a bit more, especially over white. So let's mix a bit of a base color there and just intensify that. Doesn't really want to get any darker. Okay, now it's cooperating. Right, and then of course water would accumulate here in this recess and run down there. So we are also putting in a streak here. Of course, it wants to creep into the porous green. If that happens, just wipe off your brush a tiny bit on your tissue. Or use more pure color. And then have it run down like this, and there we also have some streaking going. Always make sure that, you know, if it's a longer area that has a streak, make sure that it fades out towards the end, so you can have a bit of a darker base, because there's more of the rust accumulating, and then as it goes down, the rust will become thinner. Also, one part that I left open for that rust treatment is down here. You can see there was a big area of just green paint, and that's where I want to put some of that armor brown. Again, if it's getting too intense, just fade it out with a wet brush. And generally speaking, a few thinner coats, a few thinner layers or glazes of that base color will look better than one rather thick. So you want to stay patient there and not overdo it on the first layer. There's also some areas that look a bit boring maybe. We can play a bit with rust there. Again, do it as long, or do it all the way until it looks dusty and dry. So for example here we already have the look. And I'm not applying too much rust on this side, just to mix it up. And because we have all those features here, were some accidents, but I'm going to focus on those afterwards. But what we can do is apply a few layers here, and I'm expanding the brown a bit more towards areas that I didn't want to necessarily paint in a rust color, but since I lost the footage, I guess it makes sense to show the initial steps a bit on those parts. Right, just do it as often as you want until you got your desired intensity. Screwed this up a bit, but we'll just extend the layer into the green a bit more. And again, rust is not really calculatable, it will just do what it wants, so don't be afraid to make some what some might call mistakes, or maybe you didn't, want it to creep that far up an area, but it still did. Then just treat it like a happened accident. Okay, so next step, take some of your orange brown and apply it to the areas that you want more intensely orange. And here you're going to be a bit more careful on placement. So for example, I'm just putting it next to the darkest parts or on the darkest parts. And I'm applying it in a more spotty way. Just dabbing it on because it will dry rather with a dry look. And this is going to add those, the appearance of what can probably be described as coffee stains in rust, sort of like it's rusting out from a single dot in a circle, and then sometimes leaves coffee stains. So if you do have some coffee stains in your rust, that's not actually bad there, it's actually more realistic, so don't be worried about it. I can start in the recesses. Try not to overpower all the red you were putting down before, the reddish brown, the armor brown. And again, in some areas I will have it overpower the rest, just to make it so it overpowers it everywhere, mix it up a bit. And you can already see the intensity of the red increasing. And you can play around with that a bit. Mix it up, see how much you like it. And if you want to cover a model in Rust a bit more than this, I still recommend doing the armor brown base, because the darker area sets up the red to be more intense and have a bit more of a dramatic impact than if you were just starting with that orange red. Especially if you have lighter colors, just painting the orange right on top of this can look weird. Okay, sometimes you can use it to on areas that are more like a mid-tone and not too light. You can use it to add a bit of color variation, but again, be careful not to use it on areas that are too light, as that can look weird. I'm not applying it around the eyes, by the way, because I want probably to darkline the eyes once again before we are starting to paint the orange, the yellow for the eyes. So I want those to be, you know, contrasting to the rest. Okay, then here also starting with the recess and adding a few dots of red into the dark red brown area just to break up the surface. Again, maybe just to show you what you can do with yellow on top of that, I'm going to show you that in some area that's maybe not too prominent. So for example here, you can add yellow to the mix. Maybe here. And just try to, you know, cover less and less space, as yellow is more of an advanced stage of Rust. We can see it. It's just a tiny bit of a color gradient or a color shift. You can see it here. Let's be bold and try it down there too. And of course you can try and use pure color and just add dots, for example here. See how that looks when it dries. Not make it too regular. And again, coffee staining here is fine. Yeah, that looks a bit too regular. Going over that again with some of the red. will still mix up the surface. And give the color variation. So yeah, I actually do like that, and I don't think it's just different enough from the yellow that we used down here, I think, so it's actually fine. You can see, also add a few of those up here. And I think it can also look good in those. Just play around with intensity, switch it up in different areas, and you'll see if you like it or not. And you can, always make it more intense or stop at a certain intensity. It's up to you. Alright, so like I said, one thing that I'm doing is adding that orange on top of the black base coat here. I think I said that on the lost footage, but I'll explain later why I do this when we get to these parts. Okay, so on top of this, I think I don't have enough discoloration here. I want to mix that up. Okay, so the next step is going to be working in the cracks and all that, and I already showed you how we did that down here. So I'll do that off cam. Okay, so the next step is to also add those cracks and scratches on the rest of the model to make it to tie it together and make it more interesting yet. And the next step will be painting the metallics. So I'm going to paint all these parts and these parts, and I haven't decided yet if I am going to make them metallic or non-metallic. The original idea was to make them metallic because everyone else is doing non-metallic like crazy anyway. But yeah, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.